Episode 5 of The Acolyte is better than any episode of Ahsoka that we got.
I will agree. I will say this. This is going to kind of maybe blow people's minds. The Acolyte is not the worst Star Wars thing we've ever had. It's not even the worst Disney Star Wars thing we've ever had. I would say that it's not interesting largely. It's largely boring, but it's less boring than Ahsoka. Ahsoka was terribly boring, and the only time I ever was remotely interested in Ahsoka was when Baylan Skoll, played by Ray Stevenson, was on screen. It's the only thing. But
there's not a character in The Acolyte as interesting as Skoll.
That is true, but there are a couple of characters that I was like, that I don't hate. And in a Disney Star Wars, that's pretty good. This isn't as bad as Book of Boba Fett. It isn't as terrible as Kenobi. I'd say it's in the mid-range of Disney Star Wars.
I think it's the worst I've personally seen, and I watched Ahsoka and some of those other ones.
There are elements of it that are the worst.
I think the acting, basically across the board, is almost horrendous. And the writing and dialogue is really bad. And it is a show that legitimately does not know what it wants to be. Although in episode 5, it kind of felt like a Star Wars show.
Yeah, 5 kind of feels like a Star Wars show, and it's the first. I was like, oh wow, it only took 5 episodes to do something interesting, and that's where the very loose, meandering plot threads that we've gotten so far sort of start to coalesce and come together. There's some very obvious reveals, if you paid any attention at all. So there's no real surprise to this show for something that was billed as a murder mystery in Star Wars. It's not really a mystery. It's just, oh, the Jedi did something bad. That's obvious from the outset. That's what the show is going to be. And then the mystery is like, what was it that they did bad? But you're never really interested in it. And you kind of can probably already figure it out. It's just the how did it go down? That's, I guess, the mystery. And it's not interesting enough to keep you engaged.
So I think that you are holding against Ahsoka, ruining Thrawn in live action. And I totally understand that, because Thrawn is truly one of the great characters created, in Star Wars canon that we hadn't seen live action, that should have been foolproof. It should have been badass. But I assert that we might have seen Darth Plagueis here in The Acolyte. And I would say that's a worse version of Plagueis, if that turns out to be the case.
If that turns out to be the case, sure, but I'm not convinced that that's what we're going to get.
Plagueis lived for a couple hundred years.
Yeah. According to the novels, but remember, this is Disney Star Wars, and anything that's not movie level canon just gets thrown out. Even Lucas did that. Lucas would throw out, the expanded universe canon because he never read any of it. Granted, sometimes it would get pulled from, obviously he wanted to use Darth Talon in his sequels, which, I wish we would have gotten instead of the trash that we did get. But, a lot of the things that people are mad about this show, as far as breaking lore, or boring dialogue or badly delivered dialogue, are all things that have been prevalent in Star Wars even back in George Lucas's days. The prequels had terrible dialogue. They had terrible delivery. Think of Sam Jackson. Just every line that he delivered was just awful. It's like, I sense a plot to destroy the Jedi, Count Dooku couldn't murder anybody. It's just not his character. It's like just every line that he delivers. And then even the ham-fisted lines like, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil. It's, this just goes along with it. So it just fits right into the, the bad aspects that we already had from Star Wars.
So you're saying this is middle of the road Star Wars. I love it. A controversial take by Aaron Sparrow defending Leslie Headland in The Acolyte.
It's thoroughly mid.
I think it's worse than mid. Just the acting and the dialogue and really the story itself. I'm not sure. It's confusing. So you have the big mystery that's set up in the beginning when you have Indara and you've got May trying to kill her. And she's like, and you're like, you did this terrible thing. And then what's the big mystery about what the Jedi did that was so bad that she's going to come back and exact revenge and kill 4 Jedi Masters that apparently were there? Why you would need 4 Jedi Masters? We'll get into that here in a bit. And then the reveal is so terrible. They showed up to make sure that the Dark Force users weren't doing anything bad, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Jedi They should have just slaughtered them right then and there. That's what they do with Dark Force users. Typically, when you read a Jedi or you watch stuff about the Jedi and stuff like that, and then they're going to take the one girl, so the other girl gets mad, lights a book on fire. All the witches in the coven just fall down and die simultaneously for no reason whatsoever, and the Jedi save the one girl that they could. I don't think they really even did anything.
Well, I mean, I'm sure we'll get the reveal that they did something, and it's gonna be ham-handed. I think. I don't think it's gonna really work in execution, because the setup is so poor. It's the idea that the witches all died in the explosions and the burning of the coven, and that's what it is. It's a coven. These are occult users. Star Wars under Dave Filoni with his witchy poo wife and now Leslie Headland. It seems to want to steer away from like the idea of the noble samurai type Jedi, paint them in a bad light so that you can say like, oh, hey, look, witchcraft is good. Which, if the worst thing that the Jedi did was show up and kill a bunch of occultists, I don't know that I feel particularly angry at the Jedi for that.
It's actually surprising that they didn't do that.
I mean, yeah, it's and especially like, look, after that whole the power of many thing, like I wanted them all to die. I was like, I wanted them all to be dropped in. I just wanted turbo lasers from space to just start blasting and scouring the rock to the ground because that was so cringe. It's falling into the same problem that Disney has with everything now, is that the people that work there, the people that have been hired, they don't understand morality. And so they're doing all of this like kind of like gray morality, and it doesn't work. It doesn't resonate with normal people. And that's part of the reason that the audience is shrinking.
There's a lot of like weird, like stating one thing and then like within the same scene, they'll contradict it almost immediately. So we've got Master Soul, who's sitting there with Indara and the Wookiee Jedi, and I don't know, whatever the Padawan's name was. He was a young guy. Then Torben, I think it's Torben.
Oh yeah. You know what? Oh, in my notes, it kept autocorrecting to Tubin. So it's in my mind, he was Jedi Master Jeffrey Tubin, the guy that got caught masturbating on the news, and yet somehow kept his job.
It's Padawan Torben at the time. They go and they confront the Dark Force users, this witch coven that are doing all kinds of magic, and they got songs and dance, but they have two little girls that they, I guess, was like a virgin birth, kind of like
created
Anakin Skywalker
like that in the Zabrak's womb.
They're not supposed to be training children as part of some type of agreement, even though it sounds like they're not a part of the Republic. So that was a little bit confusing. And they're like, you just came here for the girls. And Master Soul's like, the Jedi don't take children, but we will test your children. And if they pass, we're going to take them. I was like, what?
Why aren't May and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration? Every time they say OSHA, like I'm like, you couldn't name her Asha, like just, very close, but not make me think of OSHA every single time. But why? So Anakin is born because the implication is that Palpatine influenced the midichlorians and created life in her womb, and then he grew out of Shmi Skywalker. But he's the same race. He's the same ethnicity as Shmi. Why did this Zabrak, like the woman who's like, but I created them. Okay, so you used the midichlorians to influence life, but why were the two girls that were born black like you, why did they not draw on the genetics of the host? Why were they not Zabrak children?
I don't get it either. Probably
or a mix of the two. Well, I mean, yeah, because you would have had to do the makeup each time. Which is why I think that Yord's Padawan comes in at the very beginning, in the very first episode, and then they just forget that she exists. She's not in any more episodes, and they never explain why. When she walked on, I was like, oh, that's some expensive looking makeup. I bet she's not going to stick around, and she doesn't.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird makeup in here, and some of it looks okay.
Jackie looks awful. Jackie looks like a Star Trek TNG character from like.
Well, she looks like something out of like Thundercats, like one of the Thundercats or something.
She looks like Neelix.
Yeah, there we go. And a lot of the non-CGI, like the real life, makeup effects and all that kind of stuff. The stuff that we got used to in the original Star Wars, they try to recreate it here. but none of it like looks good. They all kind of look like plastic and stuff. It's weird. Like the old lady in the coven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks worse. I don't know. Like there's clearly money spent here. Like this has the most crowd scenes, I think, of any kind of Star Wars. Like you've got aliens walking through this. The sets look like what we were promised with Galaxy's Edge, that you were going to see like aliens walking through and things like that, but you didn't get because Disney cheaped out on everything. So I see where like money was spent. I see, but like anytime they do like the up close practical effects, yeah, it looks really cheap. When Basil, by the way, I hate the fact that he's named Basil. When he shows up in the
gopher.
Yeah, like I was like, oh, it's good to see the gopher from Caddyshack getting work. And he is about the quality level of the gopher from Caddyshack. Like I keep expecting Kenny Loggins to start playing, him to just start like, I'm all right. It was just the worst. But at least there's some old school Star Wars aliens in there. I think I saw a Selkath at one point, which is from the Old Republic. And I was like, oh, that was one thing that I was like, that's kind of exciting. As an old school Star Wars nerd, they put a Selkath in there. Nice.
So almost at the heart and the soul of a Star Wars story truly are the Jedi. When you get into the trilogy stuff, and yes, it's the Skywalker saga and all that stuff. But once you get into the EU stuff, a lot of it's going to come down to Jedi. And I don't think that Hedlund understood how powerful the Jedi are and really what their place in the universe is. We literally saw in the prequel trilogy a single Jedi Master and a Padawan stop an entire war single-handedly. They basically did it on their own because that's how capable the Jedi here. At one point, you have 7 Jedi, or maybe it's 6 Jedi and 1 Padawan, chasing down one person. It's like, why would they need this many Jedi? There's only so many of them. You got this enormous galaxy. And I guess it turns out because they're cannon fodder, but like, I don't think these people understood how powerful Jedi are and what their real purpose is.
No, and you can cut through a bunch of Jedi to show us how powerful your Sith character is. That's fine. And I do appreciate the fact that, because throughout the whole show, I kept asking myself, why are there so many damn characters?
Yes.
It starts out, it doesn't make a lot of sense because you have a Jedi Master get murdered, and the implication is that Indara is pretty powerful, and she gets murdered by this Acolyte. And by the way, she dies in a really dumb way. If you guys haven't seen the first episode, it's so stupid. But a Master is murdered, and they send a Jedi Knight and his Padawan to pick up the suspected murderer, and they bring the witness along. Like, he has to be there physically to ID the person. If this person is an assassin capable of killing a Jedi Master, why would you just send a knight and his Padawan and have the witness go along? That sounds like a good opportunity for everybody to get slaughtered, and then you don't have any evidence of any wrongdoing.
And then when they catch her, because they catch the wrong person, they basically just put her on a freighter by herself.
Yeah, the Jedi don't go with her. They put her on a prison transport that has... so this person that you suspect of being a force-wielding assassin, that you put on a prison transport with no Jedi guard in, like, barred cells. Like, where she could easily, like, reach out and use the Force to grab anything. And, we find out that she's kind of like cut off from the Force and everything. But the Jedi don't really know that. And so the setup of all that is just so that you can have a prison break. And by the way, that's also dumb because they're like, we're going to break out of here. Are you in? Like, why would you do that? Like, if you already have the plan to break out of there, why would you ask this girl when she could conceivably just start yelling, hey, they're planning to break out. They just said they're planning to break out. Like, she could totally betray them. So everything about the setups is dumb. There's so much exposition.
They also come out of warp in a freaking asteroid field.
Well, they don't come out of warp at all, Wes, because that's not Star Wars.
I'm sorry. They come out of light
hyperspace.
Speed.
Yeah, they come out of light.
Sorry.
Warp. No, I understand because there is a Neelix running around on this show, so I understand how you're confusing the two properties. There is some Star Trek level.
But literally, Han Solo in the first movie, this ain't, nothing, kid. We got to do the route or we're going to go through an asteroid belt and we'll all die. You literally have to fly around them. Like, they just stopped the right in the middle of one.
I believe the exact line is jumping through hyperspace ain't like dusting crops, boy.
Crops, kid.
You fly right, fly too close to a planet or fly through a planet or fly too close to a star. That'll end your trip real quick. But they break that. I mean, look, that's already out the window because we had The Last Jedi where, you just hyperspace right through a ship. That's fine. kamikaze run. It doesn't matter, Wes. None of the rules of Star Wars matter because they just break them whenever they want to, because they need the story to happen the way that they've envisioned it, and don't try to think of any logical way for it to get there. So much of this show is exposition. It's characters telling each other their backstories instead of us seeing it. It's characters telling other characters their own backstories. Like that would be if I said, well, Wes, and then I just recounted to you your entire history as if you didn't know it. That happens in like the very first episode of this. Yord, the Killmonger hairdo, I'm gonna call him hairdo Jedi. I
thought you called him himbo.
Oh yeah, he is a himbo. Like they do the whole the shirt thing off, and then of course Jackie has to say to him, "Put your clothes on, Yord," because you can't have any heterosexual attraction in a Disney project. No.
The biggest problem I think with the show, the acting, the writing's bad. Just the central characters, Osha and May, are not very compelling. And even like the constraints of the ground rules of what they're supposed to be doing. The opening scene, May goes and confronts Indara in this bar. They have to have a confrontation with no weapons, and she has to prove that she can kill a Jedi with no weapons for her master. That's the ground rules, right?
It seems to be, but who knows? Like everything changes.
Does she not use a weapon to kill her? I remember her throwing fucking 50 knives during that fight. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, she uses
knives, not weapons.
She uses all kinds of weapons. By the way, the whole attack me with everything you have. I'm like, yeah, I saw Kill Bill too. Like, there's so much of this show that is just stolen from better product. Like, I know Leslie Headland said this was going to be Kill Bill meets Frozen. And you already know that the sister's love is going to save them at the end. It's so just so retarded. You can just see everything coming a mile away. But there's so many things that are stolen. There's a moment in this that's straight out of The Fugitive. There's the whole like plot with Tubin or Torment or Torbo or whatever Jedi receding hairline. That whole subplot with him is taken straight from Sudden Impact, the Dirty Harry movie, where Sandra Locke goes on the revenge spree 10 years later to get revenge on what was done to her and her sister. And she comes across the guy who's comatose because he's so guilt-ridden over what he did that he's just like gone into a complete fugue state. That's straight out of Sudden Impact. Like there's no ideas here.
The opening fight feels like it's out of the Matrix rather than Star Wars.
Yeah, it absolutely is out of the Matrix. And I don't have a problem with Jedi's knowing some martial arts stuff. I kind of I told you right before we started recording that when I saw Revenge of the Sith and you got that final fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan, I wanted it to be a little more visceral. I wanted there to be like a little bit more fist fighting in there because I wanted to show how personal it had become between them. And like their lightsabers lock. I wanted Anakin to throw like an elbow into Obi-Wan's face, and I wanted Obi-Wan to there is like a little bit of like Obi-Wan backhands at one point, and I was like, yeah, I want more of that. So in the 5th episode, we do get a fight between the Sith and Saul, where it degenerates into a fist fight, for a few brief seconds. And I actually liked that. So I don't have a problem with them doing martial arts, but it was so Matrixy. And there's even a moment of slow-mo. And I was like, when has slow-mo ever been a part of the style of Star Wars? I can't think of it. Can you remember any time that George Lucas used slow motion?
No, it doesn't just pop up in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, the twins are just really strange. So Saul and the Jedi Council believe Osha is the one that killed Indara, even though it was May not using weapons, but did it with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
And then they believe that, well, they're not sure what May is going to do. They think they've caught Osha, but then they're like, wait, it's not Osha. And they just kind of like, yeah, why don't you come along with us? We're going to go find Torben because we think they're going after him next. And I've read a lot of the Star Wars stuff, and maybe this is a different type of meditation than I've ever seen in Star Wars. But typically when Jedis are in like battlefield meditation or whatever, which is clearly something different than what that Torben guy was doing, they're literally completely vulnerable, and that's the best time to kill them because they can't defend themselves. But this guy is in 10 years of meditation, even though he hasn't died from starvation, and you can't touch him, but somehow she convinces him to murder himself. Like, why would a Jedi commit suicide?
Yeah, it's like, why wouldn't he have done that already if he had such guilt? Especially when she shows up alive, like, wouldn't that assuage a little of his guilt? Wouldn't he, like, there should be like some kind of discussion? But it's just another one of those moments where it's like, we wrote it in the script and it needs to happen. So, it doesn't have to be justified. It just has to happen. I actually wrote something down about that. Like I said, you've thrown me off because I had like all these copious notes, like bit by bit that we went through. Where he said like, chair droids are kind of neat. But the whole thing with Torben, you could say like it's an interesting idea to say that like this guy has been meditating for 10 years and and the Force has sustained him. He hasn't eaten, he hasn't had to go to the bathroom, but there's nothing in the backstory with him that shows that he ever would have achieved that he had that kind of power level.
He's a Padawan when we first see him.
Yeah, and then if all this went down in a way that left him with such guilt, he certainly wouldn't have attained the power to be able to do that. So it's just another thing that doesn't really make any sense. They just thought it would be cool, so they did it.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what this is as well. That would be neat. Let's put it into the show here.
Oh, that's what I wanted to say. When they go to see Torben and Jedi Master Leslie Headland's rat-faced wife, she looks like a Henson rat.
Venestra?
Vagextra?
Whatever.
Jedi Master Vag. Yeah, the Vag
way
extra.
Too young to be a Jedi Master.
Yeah, well, she says she's not that young. She says, take Osha with you. She may be a benefit. And I was like, in what way? If she's in on it, she's a liability. If it really is her sister, she might turn on you. Yeah, if she's cut off from the Force, she's a liability to be protected. There's no way in any possible interpretation of the situation that she would be a bonus. But she needs to go, so have the character say that. Yeah, it's just strange. The third issue, the third episode, the flashback episode, that should have been 5 or 10 minutes, maybe, of Saul reminiscing about how she came to be under his care and study as a Padawan. As an entire episode, what an enormous waste of time. Awful. And it's the acting, especially those kids, was just so off-putting. The kids that aren't even twins and are obviously not twins? Yes. And then it just shows you the subtle racism of these people that are supposed to be so progressive. They're twins, but we hired different actresses. But it's okay, because all black people look the same, right? Maybe that's the message. I was confused. As soon as I saw them, I was like, those kids, that's not even twins. And then the more that they went through it, the more I was like noticing all the little facial differences between the two girls, although their acting was just as, equally terrible. But then again, maybe they're matching Amanda Stenberg's acting, because she's not good in this. No, her choices with the material, and it's not great material. No charisma. No charisma. She doesn't play the two different characters differently in any way, even though they've been apart for so long. There should be some differences between the two in the way that they carry themselves. One was brought up under the Jedi in the light side of the Force, and one of them was brought up, we find out, by a Sith in the dark side of the Force. They should be completely different. Mm-hmm. But at least we find out why they still have the same haircut as adults. Mostly. It's so that in the fifth episode, so she can lean forward and cut her dreads off so that they're short like her sisters, so that she can take her place. Dreads. I think they're just braids. Braids, yeah. Oh yeah, braids. Yeah. So she cuts her braids off, and I'm thinking dreads because I'm thinking of Yord with his little short Killmonger dreads. So that she can replace her, and we can do the whole Zartan is Ripcord and Ripcord is Zartan thing. And then she goes back to Saul. May, the bad one, goes back with Saul, and he's just like, yeah, let's go. It's a good thing that he can't sense her darkness through the Force. That was so bad. He can't smell the burning hair from her cutting her hair with her lightsaber. Maybe the little gopher from Caddyshack. Yeah, maybe since she was like 7, he would know what her essence feels like. That's part of being a Jedi and a Force user. Is that you were in tune to other things. You could maybe say that he's distracted because all of his bros just got and bros and hoes just got killed. I can't believe he just left them all there on the planet. The bodies, right? Like when he's like, "Let's go," and I was like, "Don't you want to like?" Have their bodies gathered up and 4 or 5 Jedi under your charge die. You're just gonna leave them there in the woods to be picked at by the scavengers and the local fauna. All right. So she needed to murder these 4 Jedi that went and tried to take her sister, and then she lit the book on fire, and suddenly all the witches died with using no weapon. So she kills the first with the weapon. She
talks the second one into killing himself. So I guess that was a success. And then they're on the Wookiee, like the fake Wookiee planet. I don't think it's Kashyyyk, but wherever.
No, that would have been too expensive. So it's just shot in some some generic central American location. It's fine.
So we got the Wookiee Jedi. That's the third on the list, and then Sol obviously would be the last one. And it's literally May's job to go and kill them. And then she just she's talking to the dude that's helping her that was faking like he was a pharmacist or whatever, so that they could poison somebody. Don't even get me started on the stakeout. That was all awful.
Oh, hey, secure the perimeter, one guy. And then Sol no, let's talk about that because that's really dumb. So they go back and they find Asian Ezra Miller, who is her poisoner guy, her supplier. And they question him, and he's like, she's going to be back tonight, so they're like, okay. And then Sol says to Yord, secure a perimeter. And then he takes the other Jedis, we'll return tonight. So one guy, Wes, you were in the military. Can you secure a perimeter with one guy?
No, you can only watch a door. Or
yeah, yeah, exactly. So Yord has to secure the perimeter by himself, and then Sol goes, we'll come back tonight. And it's like, so what's going to keep Asian Ezra Miller from just leaving and running off? It's so stupid. Nothing is written with any idea of how to actually set up what you want to set up, the idea of what you want to do. It's just A to B to C to D, how to, just keep things moving, keep things happening. It doesn't matter if they make sense. It doesn't matter if what we just said matches the actions of the characters. It doesn't matter if it matches the actions of the plot. You just really have to turn your brain off. So it's boring. It's dumb. It's badly acted. It's badly directed. And when I say badly acted, I say badly directed because you could conceivably get better performances out of these actors. You could use alternate shot. These are the takes that you chose to use and put in the show. There might have been better ones. You could have definitely gotten better ones out of them.
So they're on the Wookiee planet. And she's just decides all of a sudden talking to Asian Ezra Miller. She's like, you know what? Now that Osha's alive, everything has changed, even though she's been alive. And I've known that for a couple episodes now. And I still try to kill a bunch of people. I'm going to turn myself into the Jedi. He's like, you can't do that. They'll execute you. She's like, we'll figure it out later.
No, she says he's like, they'll put you in prison. You'll go to jail. And she's like, not if I give them the Sith. Well, we've already established you don't know who the Sith is.
He didn't know who he was.
Yeah. You don't know the identity. And number two, that's a dumb assumption to make. You might get a lighter
beheaded immediately by the Jedi since you've killed 3 of them at this point.
Probably should be executed, by the Republic. You should definitely be locked up for the rest of your life.
If you just listen to the voices and the way that the line is delivered, that's not May, that was Osha. Where did this come from?
Mm-hmm. Because the characters are the same. They're twins. And even though they were raised differently and had vastly different experiences, and one has been trained by a Sith for her whole life to get revenge, or at least for an extended period of time, they're just the same character. They're the same happy. They're basically good. They're basically good, Wes. So
you've got Sol, you got Yord, his Padawan, which is Daphne Keene, I guess. 2 no-name Jedi.
No, that's Saul's Padawan. Yord's Padawan disappears after the first episode.
Okay, there's 2 no-name Jedi that you're not sure who they are. You got the Wookiee Jedi who's dead, and then you've got Osha who's trained to be a Jedi but decided to become a mechanic or something for no reason whatsoever.
A mechanic, which is so stupid. Just their mechanic has been used in Star Wars. And this whole mechanic thing, but you see the Wookiee, they set up the Wookiee. They show him for the first time on that planet, and those 2 guys are gonna raid his house. And he, takes the guy's weapon away and breaks it and, shows off his Wookiee strength and roars at him and they run off scared. And you go, wow, this is going to be cool. And we get to see a Wookiee Jedi fight. No. Don't get your hopes up. You're not going to get to see that.
He's been set up as a murderer because he's already dead, even though it was her job to do it without weapons. But he was struck down by a lightsaber. So she can't go and join the Jedi because they're going to think that she's a murderer. And the very last scene of episode 4, something interesting finally happens. The Dark Force user shows up. He's got a weird mask, and it looks like something Joker would put on somebody, where the weld makes a smiley face.
I called him Darth Slipknot.
Yeah, and then episode 5 is like in comparison to anything in Ahsoka and perhaps even Obi-Wan and some of those other shows, it's better than that stuff. It's the best-ish episode we've had in a while. It's actually kind of exciting. Even though 7-on-1 or 6-on-1 Jedi versus a Sith, the Sith should die unless he's like Darth Bane.
Yeah, they kind of, and it's kind of weird because they get around showing you how he managed to solo 7 Jedi, because at the end of episode 4, he shows up, he gets right into May's face. They let him float down, and like, because Saul turns around, because Saul senses him, and then the other Jedi turn around, and he floats down, which I thought was a nice nod to Count Dooku kind of floating down in Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars, the only Clone Wars that really matters, because he's talented and Filoni is not. He floats down and he lands, and then he walks right up to May, and the Jedi just stand there dumbfounded, and I think Jecki says, like, what is that? And Yord's like, I don't know. And they let him walk right up to May and get right in her face.
It's actually Osha, because May is still hiding.
Osha, I'm sorry. Yes, Osha. It's
in the Wookiee hideout.
Like, they're exactly the same. Yeah. So he walks right up to Osha, and then only once he ignites his lightsaber does Saul go, Osha, run!
Shit.
And it's like, if she was actually in any danger, she would have just got swept. But instead, he force throws her in the grand tradition of villains, grabbing somebody and throwing them instead of killing them right away when they should. So he throws her, and then the Jedi rush towards him. 7 Jedi rush towards him with their lightsabers out, and he basically does a big force push and sends them all knocked back. And that's where the episode ends. So when we get to the next episode, they get around how he's able to solo 7 Jedi by going to Osha's point of view as she wakes up on the ground. And of course, the white guy Jedi is the first dead Jedi she sees.
There was a good moment though where he impales the one dude, and then he force pulls another Jedi to impale a second one.
I wrote that down. Cool. I wrote that down in my notes that was cool. The lightsaber fight is decent. It's pretty well done. But you don't know where Jecki is. Like, it's she just kind of shows up to fight May later in the episode, and that's another cool fight. But she actually kind of,
May soloed Master Indara. And then Jecki's a Padawan. I mean, she's not supposed to be Anakin. Like, you know what I mean? She's like a normal Padawan. She should have got house, but she does a pretty good job.
Well, what I wrote was, I said that it is obvious that this contest cannot be decided by our knowledge of the Force, but by our place on the progressive stack. So, when they started fighting, I was like, wait a minute. 2 women of color? I don't know who's going to win. And it was Jecki.
She comes out on the better end of it. And actually, by the end of the 5th episode, before this episode, the only Jedi that really stood out as possibly being cool is really Saul. And he's trying real hard with the limited script that he has. Almost no emotional range is available to the character. He's just kind of got to play sad in a very charismatic, endearing way. And with that, I think the actor himself does a really admirable job trying to make you like him, even though he's just kind of a sad Jedi. But by the end of it, I thought Jecki finally got to stand out from the other Jedi and make you want to root for it.
Yeah, Daphne Keane doesn't come off as a good actress in this, but I don't think anybody does. And I can't necessarily say that that's the fault of any of the actors involved, because we've seen Star Wars turn good actors bad, even back in Ahsoka. Everybody in Ahsoka is boring. So I don't know what it is. I normally like
Rosario Dawson. She's great.
I normally love Rosario Dawson. She's usually great, but as Ahsoka, she's terrible. Sabine was terrible. Like, all those characters were awful. So I'm not ready to throw all these actors under the bus, but the performances are all terrible. We do get to see Jecki do some cool stuff, and then they kill her, which I was surprised. Then they kill Yord, and I was surprised again.
That one was crazy. Yeah.
I did not expect that to happen, especially after he got the leg wound early on, which I was like, that's dumb. He's got plot armor. Why didn't the Sith just kill him? He gets the leg wound, but then he's running full speed later. And he's running full speed when he gets killed. But that was, I was like, oh, cool. They're actually killing these characters. Now I understand why you packed in so many characters that you didn't have time for, or you didn't have, the ability to do anything useful with. Is because you needed cannon fodder for this episode. All right. At least there's that. At least I got to watch them die. And that's why this is like the most interesting episode. The kind of the Ezra Miller kind of Asian guy, of course, he turns out to be Darth Slipknot. He's got like
and it couldn't have been anybody else.
No,
because they constantly use male pronouns with the character, and there was no way Leslie Headland was going to misgender a character or whatever. And he's literally the only male character associated with May.
So again, a mystery that's not really a mystery with no surprise in the reveal.
For a moment, I thought it could have been their mother.
I thought so too. But and then I thought that maybe the male pronouns, I was like, oh no, they're not going to misgender in a Leslie Headland show, in a modern Disney show. But then I also thought, well, maybe to intentionally misdirect, but but like after you got a couple episodes in, I was like, oh, it's definitely Asian Ezra Miller that's the Sith guy. Especially when they kept showing how clumsy he was. I was like, oh, me so clumsy. Ooh, like I was like, oh, she's read the meme about
the Darth Jar Jar moment.
Yeah, and that's what she's gonna do. Because everything here is from stuff that Leslie Headland has either seen or grabbed from. Much like Dave Filoni. You look at all of Dave Filoni's work; it's all just grabbed from the expanded universe. Kind of changed around a little bit, given a different coat of paint, and then he puts it out there as his own creation. So I'm not surprised that that's happening with his acolyte. He, of course, she's gone and she's studied under Dave Filoni, which is just the worst person that you can maybe study under, aside from Harvey Weinstein.
So there's a pretty decent fight between Saul and this mysterious Sith. Some people thinking it might be Plagueis. That goes out pretty well, and they find a way to get him out of there and not have to kill anybody else, which is perfectly fine. There's a conversation where he's like, tell me your name. Once his helmet comes off, it's like, you would call me Sith. And basically I wanted my own apprentice, and I need an acolyte to stand under me, but you won't allow it to happen because you think you should have control of the Force and stuff like that. Painting the Jedi in a bad light. But it is from the point of view, I guess, of the villain.
Yeah, so from the point of view of the Sith, there was a couple of lines that I liked. Before they did the reveal, when they were fighting, when Saul and Darth Slipknot were fighting, and he says, why would a pupil hide his face from his master, or why would a master hide his face from his pupil? And then the Sith goes, you tell me. And it's like, yeah, because they're setting up that Saul did something bad.
Saul must have, they're definitely hitting heavily at Saul did something. But the last time they were heavily hitting at the Jedi doing something, they didn't really do anything at that temple. So I don't know.
Well, but we get the line later where May says to Osha that they brainwashed you. So we may see that they use the Force to kind of like edit her memories, kind of like Dr. Light in Identity Crisis, the way that Zatanna altered his memories.
Well, that would be pure evil, Aaron.
It would, but that's where we're going, because the Sith are just misunderstood, like Harvey Weinstein and his assistant. They're just misunderstood. And it's the people that want morality that are bad. The people that stand for morality, those are the bad people, Wes. That's what we have to do. We have to tear down the good and prop up the evil and make the evil not look so bad. That's what we got to do with Star Wars. That's what we got to do with Marvel. It's what we got to do all throughout Disney.
They could have tightened this up and made it pretty good. The first 4 episodes should have been compacted to 2 episodes. The entire 3rd episode should have been compacted down to a 10-minute flashback scene at the most, and gotten to episode 5 and episode 3. And I think people would have been a lot happier, because at least you got somewhere. And that was kind of exciting, but it just took way too long to get there. And I mean, now that I don't have to, I'm not going to watch episodes 6, 7, and 8 personally, because I don't think they're going to nail the landing just because they got one episode pretty decent.
And just because you got one episode that made me sit up and be like, oh, this isn't, the worst thing I've ever seen. It's really not enough to keep me. I don't care about May or Osha. I don't care about their journey. I don't care about finding out what happens to them. The only thing that I'm sort of mildly interested in is Saul and who the apprentice is and what their history is. But it's not enough to get me to come back. And that's really the problem with Star Wars, is that there's just not enough there to get you to come back. I don't have a problem with a lot of the things that other people had. Like people were complaining about, the thread and calling the Force the thread. And I'm like, look, from the point of view of these witches, that's just their interpretation of the Force. I imagine that on different planets who've never heard of the Jedi, who've never studied the Force the way that the Jedi have, who've never laid it out the way that the Jedi have, I'm sure they come up with all kinds of interpretations. I'm fine with character point of views being wrong. Just like, with May at the beginning when she says that a Jedi never, draws their lightsaber unless they intend to, kill or whatever.
Certainly not a rule that I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's her perspective. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with the thread because that's their perspective. Whatever. It doesn't make it right. But, it's when you start to break the hard and fast rules of the universe, like with the Holdo maneuver, that I start to have the problem. Even the Ki-Adi-Mundi thing, I rolled my eyes because I was like, we had to put in some kind of nostalgia.
I think they wanted Yoda, and they probably wouldn't allow him to do it.
Yeah, they were like, I don't know if we're ready for you to break Yoda completely. Although, why wouldn't they? Honestly, at this point, it doesn't matter. Nobody's reading the High Republic. Nobody cares. Nobody's watching the show. You might as well just desecrate everything while you're at it, because nobody considers this, only the hardest of hardcore shills consider this to be canon Star Wars. Yeah.
But I do think this is probably worse than Ahsoka. But the one episode is good.
No, I disagree. I disagree. It's boring like Ahsoka. It's badly acted like Ahsoka. It's badly directed like Ahsoka. It looks better than Ahsoka in a lot of places. I will say that I like a lot of the sets. I do have a problem with the fact that under Disney, every Star Wars planet looks the same. Like they've decided on a Star Wars look, and that goes from planet to planet. There's never anything that's kind of different. And with George Lucas, we did see that things were different. You had like some of the same tech here and there, but when you went to Theed on Naboo, it looked dramatically different than Tatooine, and Tatooine looked dramatically different from Coruscant. All these Star Wars planets just are the same backwater, basically, with some little, geographic differences. So I think that's a problem. It shows a lack of imagination. It is weird to me, though, that they've captured a Star Wars look in this show for these backwater planets, yet they couldn't capture a Star Wars look for their doomed galactic Star Cruiser. That thing did not look like Star Wars at all. It looked like generic space show. So yeah, there's a lot of problems with this. I think it's better than Ahsoka. I think that it's better than Book of Boba Fett by far.
So you think Book of Boba Fett is the worst Star Wars you've seen, including Holiday Special?
Yeah, at least the Holiday Special was produced by people that had no idea what Star Wars was, although I would say the same thing about Disney. At least Disney understands the look. But the Star Wars Holiday Special was very much a product of the cocaine-fueled 70s television, production. It has its weird charm. It also is largely boring, but it has a weird charm to it. I don't know that this will ever...
Wookiee in a freaking apron, man. It's no better.
They decided to just have the Wookiees talk with no subtitles for an extended period of time. Tell me that decision's not fueled by cocaine.
It's got to be. So there we go. That's our review, comprehensive review of the Acolyte, Star Wars The Acolyte, episodes 1 through 5. We went through it. They were rough times. I was not very excited, but at least there was something akin to a payoff here at the end.
I'll tell you what the payoff for me is the fact that Lane paid for us to have Disney Plus for a month, and I'm getting to watch X-Men 97, which the first couple episodes I am enjoying so far.
Very nice. If you would like more conversations about that, Aaron and I will be hitting X-Men 97 next week. Maybe I'll be able to check it out myself. This is only one part of the Geek Picks, a much bigger podcast exclusive to Think Critical Patreon. If you like Aaron and myself, you would like to support us there, there's a link in the video description.